Each candidate will take a quick stretch break, and then the last hour, you folks will have the opportunity to ask questions of the candidates. And then each candidate will have about 90 seconds. We have some timekeepers, Paul and Louise Cowan down here, who have great signs for all of us to remind us when we've got a minute left, 30 seconds, or when your time is up. I ask all of you to be respectful and ask for no interruptions or demonstrations of support or opposition, and then we'll be doing that at the end, recognizing our candidates at the end. Also, the Opera House is providing coffee and refreshments. If you are so inclined, please quietly get up and get those throughout this evening. So we will begin with opening remarks, and the candidates have drawn numbers. So randomly, they are going to share opening remarks with you in the order of Stephanie Hawk, Dana Dow, Wendy Wolf, and Chris Johnson. And we're going to reverse that for the closing remarks. As in prior debates, my questions will be directed to all of the candidates, and each will have up to 2 minutes to respond, followed by approximately 30 seconds for any rebuttals as needed. I may sprinkle some rapid-fire questions at some point with requests from the candidates to either answer yes or no. Can you hear me now? Okay. When we get to the questions from you, the audience, we will ask you to come up to this microphone up here, state your name and your question. And remember, this is not a time for speeches, but a time for questions. And I'd ask you to keep those to about 30 seconds so we can get as many questions in as possible. So, here we go with the questions. Welcome. Well, can you guess what the first question is going to be?
I'm guessing the roundabout.
Oh, yes. No, that's not. Thank you. We will go with the opening remarks. And Stephanie, you get to go first. Thank you.
Oh, save first is good. First, I want to thank the Opera House, Peggy, Chip, Bruce, everybody for putting this together. They started in July, and of course, you're thinking all through July, August, September, October. So we're good now. Just a little about myself. I graduated Boothbay High School in '84. My family opened the Carriage House in '87. I worked at various restaurants throughout the years, opened Hawk Motors in 2008. I've been on the school board for 7 years, Rebuilding Together for 3 years. Volunteer for Windjammer, Friends of Windjammers, Food for Thought, the Clothing Closet, and the American Legion. I help out with various other nonprofits, and just a little advertising note. On October 30th, Robinson's Wharf is having a project graduation that I will be cooking at. So just to, that's a little about myself and just a bunch of other stuff.
Thank you.
Yep.
Dana, you get to go next.
I'm Dana Dow from Waldoboro. My wife and myself own Dow's Furniture. We have for many years. I've lived my entire life here, all 65 years. I was your senator from 2004 to 2008. I got done in 2008 because I could see a good recession coming along. I didn't want my wife to get stuck running the store just by herself while I was playing politics in Augusta. I went back to Augusta to serve one House term from 2010 to 2012. I've been a school teacher. I taught chemistry and physics at Madomic Valley. I've been on the school boards, the Region 8 school board in Rockland, which serves all the local high schools in Knox and Arlington.
Thank you, Dana. Wendy.
Well, good evening. Thank you, Peggy and Bruce and Chip and the Opera House. I do want to use a little bit of my time to say how much I admire all the candidates up here, because I'm running for state office for the first time, and I will tell you, it is a tough job, and I really respect everyone that tries to seek public office. It's a lot of work, and I'm proud to be sitting up here at the table. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a West Boothbay Harbor resident. I'm a physician. I'm actually a pediatric cardiologist who practiced for about 25 years, taking care of young children with heart disease. I got very frustrated with our jerry-rigged and crazy healthcare system, so I went into health policy and actually worked in Washington, D.C. and the federal government doing health policy work at the federal level in both the Clinton and the Bush administrations for several years. After that, I came to Maine and had the pleasure and privilege of running the state's largest private nonpartisan health foundation called the Maine Health Access Foundation. It's a statewide organization committed to promoting access to affordable health care for everyone in Maine, particularly people who are uninsured and underserved. And I just stepped down from that position at the end of September, so I'm a new retiree and adjusting to that. To fill my time, I actually anticipated retirement by running for the Boothbay Board of Selectmen. I've been elected twice as a selectman. And one of my platforms was actually trying to think about how we could bring the region together, working with Boothbay and Boothbay Harbor on economic development for our region. And I chair the Joint Economic Development Committee that has now been joined by Edgecombe and Southport. My family all lives in Maine. I have my children in York and Portland, and my grandchildren get to say they are native Mainers. They live in York. I'm very jealous of the fact they get to claim that. So thank you, Peggy.
You're welcome, thank you. Chris Johnson.
Hello, everyone. I guess my voice carries well. Thank you for having this event here. It's always great to have a chance to share what's on our minds with constituents and help them make their informed decisions as voters. I've been your state senator since February 2012, and this would be my 4th term, reaching term limits if I am re-elected. I'd very much like to have that opportunity to represent you. There are a lot of things that we still need to do a better job of in the state of Maine. And I think that what we can do to build our economy and create jobs in this state based on our strengths, not just jobs that are a company that will move it somewhere else when there's a better offer from another state, but ones that have a reason to be here in Maine for what they do. And it came to my attention recently that Maine doesn't actually have an economic plan. So I am working on my work on the Government Oversight Committee to change that. We're proposing some changes to legislation so that not only do we have an expectation that there will be a plan, but a good outline of what sorts of things we want to be examined and how to inform the legislature and the executive branch in their future work around economic development and other areas of policy, but also that we staff and fund that effort adequately so that we can have, as a state, a good plan for how to get to a stronger future for me.
Thank you, Chris. Now it's my turn, I guess. One of my first questions is important to me, and it's about healthcare. It's something that I've done all my life. And currently our state has many citizens who lack access to healthcare services, either because they cannot afford insurance, they're underinsured, or face social or cultural barriers. What steps would you take to correct this imbalance? And I'm going to start at the end with Chris, and we'll come this way. And my next question, I'll give Dana the first opportunity. So we'll rotate. Who gets to be first?
So the first thing, I think that is disenfranchising a large segment of our population, roughly 70,000 Mainers, including veterans, is the fact that Maine is one of the states that did not expand Medicaid, our Medicare system. That is probably the biggest barrier to access to health care, other than people who are having a very hard time affording what they do have available for health care. And I want to first make the point that this is a positive thing, very much so, for our healthcare system, for Maine's economy, for jobs, but also for all those other people trying to afford their insurance. Let me take it quickly there. The hospital charity care and bad debt in 2014 was $570 million. That would not be anywhere near as bad. Roughly 40% of that would be covered by expanding MaineCare. $320 million would be flowing into Maine next year, about 95% of the cost of that program. It would create 4,000 jobs in the healthcare sector. And that's not insignificant because it also creates another $500 million in economic activity, $23 million in additional tax revenues to the state because of those salaried jobs, people that are being paid. And in doing that, it also means that our rural health centers and clinics would have more funding for people to get the health care they need. They'd have more positions that are funded by that and would be more likely to remain open and operational so that Maine people have access to health care. The last thing I want to say is that in states where they have expanded, their cost of private insurance is 7% lower than in states where they haven't, such as Maine.
Thank you, Chris. Dana?
Thank you for that question. Healthcare in Maine, when I was in the Senate before, all but 10% of the people were covered, and that's not good enough. Right now, I believe it's 5% that aren't covered. So we need to address some of those 5%. Getting health care more from the federal government, the state had an opportunity to do that, but it requires that we come up with our 10% while the federal government comes up with their 90%. And it didn't exist in the budget, and we decided, or they decided, that there were better places to spend it in other health care issues. And so that's where the money went. And the money would have benefited young single adults that are mostly healthy, parents of children, young parents that are covered, children are covered. So the state had to decide where they were going to place their money. I think we need to take a look at the expense of health care and the insurance. The insurance is atrocious. The expenses are horrible. They're too high, and even the Obamacare coming out is too expensive. It's too, the gaps between your health and what you're allowed to do. I mean, if you get sick, you may have a $5,000 deductible. That's unacceptable for many people. So we do have to take a good look at that and come up with some solutions to help solve those problems. My solutions always involve making the economy of Maine better so that we have more income and more tax revenues from the increased economy to take care of many of these problems.
Thank you, Dana. Stephanie?
In 2001 and 2003, when Maine expanded, the state was just flunking. It was bleeding red, the hospitals were not paid for, and as a result, everything was just going downhill. So I don't think that you should take able-bodied people, people with no disability, people that are capable of working, and putting them on the dole, because our state can't pay for it. So, if they get jobs, then they can go on Obamacare. And not that Obamacare is great, that it was great at the opener, and each year that it goes on, it goes downhill. So that's got a big problem too. And if I could solve that, I'd probably run for governor. But giving it all away, I think giving people incentive to get out there and start paying for stuff, we just can't afford it. And you can't have all these big gaps. We can't be back in the same situation that we were before. 1 minute. So no, I don't think giving it all away is the answer.
Thank you. Wendy?
Well, as a physician, I feel it is morally wrong in a country as wealthy as ours that certain people are shut out of our healthcare system, and they are mostly people with lower incomes, a lot of them hardworking people, who in Maine are shut out of our healthcare system because the state actually cut back the Medicaid program. And what we're talking about or having different positions on is actually restoring Medicaid once again to about 70,000 individuals in Maine. And I want to ask each of you in the audience, how secure would you feel when you walk out of here if you were uninsured, driving down the highway, commuting, wondering if an accident or something that would happen on a lobster boat or on the job would incapacitate you and financially put your family in peril, put your job in peril, all the money you might have invested in a business because of unpaid medical bills? People who are shut out of the healthcare system face that every day. So this is a policy difference between us. Actually, I think Chris, Dana, and I all have talked about restoring Medicaid. I want to address Stephanie's point that this happened in 2001 and the state bled red. Well, 2001 in healthcare is an eon ago, and during that time the state expanded Medicaid, but there was no federal money to pay for that expansion. We are now in a situation where if we restored that coverage, the federal government picks up 90 cents on the dollar of every dollar we spend in health care for those individuals. And it's because we have uncovered people that we have this cost shift onto private insurance that raise insurance rates here in Maine and also raise the price of health care so it is less affordable for everyone in the state of Maine.
Yes. The projections are saying that it's going to cost Maine taxpayers more than $220 million in the next 5 years. So that's not free money. And as far as 90 cents on the government can, the government also said, you have your doctor, you can stay with your doctor. They change their minds frequently. So I don't think you can bank on that. And I think Maine needs to stabilize themselves so that they're not in the problem that they were. In the hospitals, no one was getting paid, and they were getting laid off because they didn't have the money. So I don't, nothing's free.
May I? Yes. Sure. Well, I agree, nothing is free for sure. And first of all, the cost in Maine, if you actually look at the Maine legislature in the first session in 2015 passed or restored Medicaid, there was analysis that was done that looked what would be the impact on the state budget, just state spending. Chris talked about jobs and the economic impact of increasing healthcare spending. But the analysis showed that because federal dollars would now come into Maine and pay for those healthcare costs, the state budget, or the state, could actually save $26 million. Because what would happen is that federal contributions would replace what we are paying now with your taxpayer dollars in services for mental health, services for folks who are in our prisons that need help. Those are being paid out of the state budget now. Those folks could be enrolled in the state Medicaid program where the federal government would pick up 90% of that cost. So it is not only a moral imperative, but it also makes economic sense in the sense that we could actually save money at the state level if we made this wise decision. And I will say that hospitals are still bleeding red because they have a tremendous amount of charity care now, and the biggest risk to rural hospitals nationally, and we see this in Maine, is if you are a rural hospital like St. Andrews, like Miles Memorial, or Lincoln Health, excuse me, the biggest risk to you is to be in a state that has not passed Medicaid. There is a tremendous positive correlation with small hospital closure in states that have not passed Medicaid as part of the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. I don't know about you, but having a rural hospital system here in a state like Maine is very important to me, and we need to look at the whole picture of how we're providing health care to our citizens here in the state.
Can I ask one question?
Let's go with Dana and Chris, and then Stephanie, I'll get back to you.
I don't ever want to go back to the point where we owe the hospitals hundreds of millions of dollars through our neglect because we wanted to spend the money somewhere else. That caused hospitals to have to lay off people. There weren't enough nurses. The salaries didn't go up for all the custodial people and all the people that work for the hospital. Don't ever go back there. As far as money coming in from the federal government, the key is if we spend it, they will match it. So we don't automatically get 300 million. This doesn't roll into the state without us doing our share. I would much rather improve the economy, put some of these young people that are relatively healthy, and we need them on a healthcare system, give them good jobs so that they can afford somehow to work in the system. Companies pay for health insurance. My company pays for health insurance for my employees. It started out with one employee decades ago. Now we have 20. It takes a long time to build a business. It would take a long time to turn the state of Maine around. But I would rather have permanent solutions and getting people to work in part of the system and working for companies.
Thanks, Dana.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out a few things. First of all, in the longer term, if you want to address the fact that costs do keep going up for healthcare, we need to pay even more attention to keeping people healthy. And people who don't have coverage aren't getting the preventive care they need to stay healthy. Furthermore, we're not going to get to significantly lower healthcare costs if we don't start taking the profit-taking out of this. Our hospitals are already nonprofit, but we're losing a lot of what we're investing for dollars for a basic, essential need of people, healthcare, in insurance company profits. At some point, this nation needs to move to a single-payer, universal healthcare system like the other developed nations have that are achieving much lower cost and much better outcomes by any measure. Some people say, oh, look at Canada, they wait too long, people don't like it. But the truth is, the Canadians who end up coming to the US for their care are just a tiny drop in the bucket. A study of 18,000 Canadians showed that only 90 had received care in the US, and only 20 of those were by choice. The rest were an emergency need while they were here. So that's less than 0.1% of Canadians seek their health care here in the US.
We're going to have to wrap it up.
Thank you.
Okay. Stephanie, I'll give you this one comment.
I just, two comments, that where were you getting your numbers from?
This was an independent analysis done by a nationally reputable firm called Manat Consulting based in New York. They're
Right.
experts in Medicaid, and they were actually asked by the legislative work group to come and re-testify at the work group because they used some of their analytic numbers in the cost projections from the staffing office.
Well, they actually never asked DHS for any figures. They're going on projections and accusations, so that's not really, that's just something to make it look good and have the numbers correct. But if you look at all the states, the 17 states that have expanded, the predictions above their projections go anywhere from 115% to 172% above. So they're not, the numbers aren't what they're saying.
We're going to have to wrap this particular question up, and we're going to start with another one. If you have things you want to share in your closing remarks, we'll do it then. One way to improve public education without spending more money is to cut the bureaucracy and the red tape that makes it difficult for principals and teachers to do their job. Do you agree with this statement? And if yes, why? If you do not agree with this statement, explain how you feel we can be more supportive of our public school system. And Dana, I'll start with you.
I somewhat agree with the statement. I think that one of the biggest lies that's out there about education is that somehow if we just keep cutting back on the over-administration, we're going to save a lot of money and solve our problems. And I don't believe that's true. I don't think there's too much administration. We have cut it back. But the legislature, the state, and the federal government, every year or two, ask the administration to perform and produce more and more reports that take away from their time that they need to spend developing education. And so, from that aspect, I disagree with a lot of people. I wouldn't go picking always on the administrations. No more than I pick on the administrations of hospitals or anything else to try to save money. I just think that's a big, not a lie, but it's a wives' tale, and I don't go that direction. So, as far as improving education, I believe we need to allow our teachers and our principals and administration to be able to work better and use their individual skills, especially teachers, to do the things that they do best, and they seem to get stuck in the system. The problem with education nationally and in Maine is we have kept changing our system of how we're going to teach, and I just wish that we would get to a system and stick to it. And if we did that, even if it was the second best system, it would be the best because everybody would be on board and we would improve education that way. I'm a huge education supporter because I was a teacher myself.
Thanks, Dana. Stephanie?
I also believe that they are putting too much on the teachers and the administration and the teachers. I mean, every couple of years, the state comes up with a new plan and new ways for check and balance, and they have to do this, and they spend all summer and all meetings, and it puts so much strain on them, and it's taken time out of the classrooms because the teachers are very worried about, you know, what's coming through this year. Now what are we going to have to do? So I think if they stop doing that, 2010 and 2012, they put a lot of mandates on, and it's just, I mean, it overloaded them. So I think if you let the teachers teach, you know, encourage kids to go into different studies, whatever, not everyone's college ready. So let them find their niche and spend your time and money in that and not on all this paperwork. I think it's ridiculous.
Thank you. Stephanie, Wendy. Thank you, Stephanie. Wendy.
I'm afraid there's not going to be too much controversy across the table on this. You know, I think the people that have some of the hardest jobs in the world are our teachers, first of all. And I think many of us sitting in this room can think back to gifted teachers that have touched our lives and really shaped who we are. And what a valuable, valuable thing that is to have a wonderful teacher open up new worlds for you. So when I think about the issue with the schools, I think I agree with Dana and Stephanie, is that it's incredibly chaotic what we're trying to achieve. We've had No Child Left Behind, which were supposed to be standards, and then everyone was teaching to test, trying to measure performance and have performance-based rewards in education. Now we're talking about changing that and modifying it, and now we're also talking about should we adopt Common Core. So if I were both an administrator and a teacher, I would feel like I'm in a sailboat, constantly tacking this way and then that way. I think I agree, what we need to have is some consistency in how we expect our education system to both teach and perform and stick with that, and then provide support to teachers, and also not ask administrators to generate as many reports, although I have to say, for every sector, healthcare, education, etc., there is just a wealth and a growth of the sort of reports that you have to generate to both document and justify spending, standards, etc. I think we need to streamline that, and I think this is one area where we could make administration getting better value for every dollar that we spend for administrators.
Thank you. Chris?
Thanks. I think we have a large degree of agreement on this panel. But I would say that one of the things that we have managed to do is significantly reduce administrative costs. I look at the RSU 12, where I've been on the board since consolidation happened, and we figured out how to make that happen. And we have significantly reduced administrative costs, and we have continued to find ways to reduce it slightly in ongoing budget. But in the classroom and what supports teachers have, that's the most important thing. And instead of the emphasis on tests, as though both students and teachers were widgets being manufactured in a factory, where they're actually, these are people that need to become great learners and great teachers. And we have good teachers, but no teacher should be standing alone trying to take care of all the diverse problems that students come into their classroom with, and the challenge of how to reach a particular child by themselves. They really need a support structure of other educators in the building as peers that are working with them, to know that they have good support from the administration for strengthening their skills. And they need to be able to measure how well a student is doing by more things than just a very standardized test. They need to be able to use portfolios, other forms of assessment, have the support of their peers in reaching every child, because what really is important in the end is that every child ends up being a great learner. What you learn in school is a foundation, but what gives you the most benefit lifelong is how good a learner you are, because you're going to continue to encounter things that you didn't learn in school. You'll be figuring out new things.
Thanks. All set on that question? Yeah.
Oh, no.
Oh, no? Oh, Dana?
No, education is so important. I'd like to continue. One of the new referendum, the citizen referendum, if you look at that, it also has reports that need to be done so they can tell you how they've spent the money, the additional money that they could get from this. But that isn't the main thing that I really want to take a look at. I believe in testing, but I think some testing is useless. There's some testing that we do that the teachers don't get the results until 6 months later, which does not help them in the classroom. There are a bunch of tests called NWEA, Northwest Education Association. Those tests the students take, and they're very good tests, and the results come back immediately, which help the teachers determine which students need the additional help. And schools are beginning to take time so that they're taking sessions of time so that they can call students together that need help in certain subject areas and come in and they tag them. They say, you come in for this 40-minute period, we need to work on such and such in this subject. So I believe in testing, but I don't believe in all the federal testing, all the stuff that we're doing that takes so much time out of the classroom and doesn't have a good effect because the test results come back. They're taken in the spring, they come back in the fall, and the kids have moved on to the next grade. Those are a waste. We need to.
Thanks, Dana. My next question. I'm concerned about the number of people unemployed in our state who cannot find employment or who have to leave our state to seek a better paying job. Please state 3 things you feel would address this issue. Stephanie?
Well, in the job bank, and I'm sure that the restaurants and probably a lot of the local places, there's 20,000 jobs in the job bank, so there are some jobs. To keep them here, I think you need to keep them working and giving them incentive to make more money. I mean, that's the end of the game, make more money. And if you tax and tax and tax and tax, no one's gonna be able to afford to live here. So you gotta keep the businesses going. I mean, we have businesses in Boothbay Harbor that struggle in the winter. And we do have the amount of people, so we just need to keep them here. And I think that's a big thing, regulation and taxes. They're saying, I'm out of here. New Hampshire's tax-free, Florida, so they're heading out. Plus we need housing. And housing is a huge problem around here. And there is housing, but it's very expensive. And until we get property taxes down into play, I mean, people can't, they're not gonna rent their house and lose money. So they've gotta at least get cost and hopefully make a little bit. So we have to, you know, they all work together. So we need to keep all of that together.
Thanks. Thanks, Stephanie. Wendy?
You know, it's an interesting thing. We're in this inflection point, I think, in our economy where we have these jobs available, but we have a real mismatch in the skills of our workforce and the skills that they need for the available jobs. Let's take the paper mill in Bucksport that closed a little while ago. Here you have a bunch of people that have worked for their whole lives in a paper mill. They may be in their 40s, 50s. They're out of a job now. There are other jobs available. They're not jobs available in sectors and skills that they're familiar with. So I think one of the answers that we have to focus on is how do we retrain and retool people to be ready to meet the jobs that are in the job bank. A retired or a mill worker that's put out a job when the mill closes can find a job probably as a radiology tech, a nurse, but they have to go back and have retraining for that, and they have to have support when they go back for retraining because they're going to have to figure out how they're going to care for their family. So I do think that we have a challenge in front of us of trying to prepare both young people and people who have lost jobs and are looking for other opportunities to have the skill sets that we need. And many of the jobs that used to be pretty straightforward, fabricators, construction, the new manufacturing calls for much more precision work. You need to know much more about computers. Think about when you take your car into your shop now. They run all the analytics on a computer when they're going to fix your car. So you need to know how to use those things, and you need to have the training so you have the skills to be competitive for the jobs that are available.
Thank you. Chris?
Well, this is one of our biggest challenges actually as a state, both having better paying jobs and retaining young people here. Because a lot of the people in our current jobs are retiring or will in the next few years. So the ideas that I think are most important are that we invest in our infrastructure and our R&D. We start helping those new jobs to come into existence. And even in the shorter term, we can do things like the solar bill that was vetoed and not overridden would have meant several hundred more jobs. The healthcare and pain care expansion we just spoke of, 4,000 jobs. the housing shortage we have. In fact, the bond, 15 million for elder housing is affordable. None of that money's been spent. We need to be investing actually more than that and releasing the monies, putting people to work in construction jobs. Those are more good-paying jobs. But look at things like the infrastructure and R&D, because the mills that have closed do need to have people back to work in them. And that's not going to happen in the paper industry by wishful thinking. It needs to happen by our building on what the university has developed in their laboratories for new wood-based products for the construction industry, and the development of those to commercialize them for a new manufacturing opportunity would put a lot of rural Maine woods workers back to work. We have great examples in infrastructure. Both our roads and bridges are deficient. Our broadband is close to non-existent. And those are areas, as well as housing, that matter to young people needing to stay here, or a business able to locate in a town because they have what they need for infrastructure.
Thank you, Chris. Dana.
Thank you. No matter who's been in charge of Augusta for decades, all the policies have failed. We are not doing enough for business in this state. We've neglected business, and we need to get off our duffs and get going on supporting business. We haven't supported it enough. The proof of that is the population of the state of Maine is flat. Matter of fact, in 2010, we started backwards because deaths were outweighing births in this state. We need to increase our population. All our young people, your grandsons and children and neighbors have had to leave the state to find work. We have not paid enough attention to what we're doing. What would I do differently? One of the things that I would go back and increase the Department of Business in the state of Maine, double or triple the size. The way we do things now, we react when some company goes out of business. We need to be proactive. We need to have people in the state that go out and talk to businesses all the time and say, what can we do for you? What do you need? An example is Verizon in Bangor. 200 workers are leaving the state. They're going to other centers around the country. Why weren't our people out talking to them years ago saying, what can we do for you if you're going to consolidate? Let's show you how it's best to come and consolidate here in Maine. And we need to do that. We need to have the funds that are available to help businesses expand. Why should we be shipping our lobsters to Canada to be processed and then shipped out of the country? Why aren't we doing it here and providing jobs in the process?
Thank you, Dana. And rebuttal? Remember, 30 to 45 seconds on the rebuttal. Stephanie.
Well said. The businesses are moving out mainly because of the cost. And as far as education, it's there. You can do it, but you have to have a little motivation. Construction workers, you mentioned them. Cars, I have a shop, and they go to school, and they go to school frequently to keep up with but it's very difficult to hire someone to build a house, a plumber, an electrician. So we need to start focusing on not just sending them to a 4-year college so they get a $50,000 debt. Let's send them so that they can get something and they can work.
Okay. Wendy?
Yes, this is no rebuttal, but I do want to say I put a slightly different emphasis on what I think the legislature could do. There's tremendous capacity and exciting stuff happening in advanced manufacturing that really could open up new markets for us in Maine, and also a whole new economic sector. For example, in our pulp and paper industry, working with the University of Maine Graduate School, there's a whole change in how we're looking at pulp and paper industry to provide new products that are very exciting and provide different types of jobs, utilizing our natural resources in an economy that looks forward instead of looking backwards. The legislature can actually help by putting more money into the Maine Technology Institute to spur entrepreneurialism, and also the Maine Venture Fund, because we are very deficient in our research and development resources here, and it's one place where we can build jobs that really have a future and a sustainable future here in Maine.
Chris?
Thank you. And regarding R&D, that's something that we haven't invested in as a state in 6 years. Other parts of the country are investing 2% of their gross domestic product. And in New England, many of the states, 4%. We were at 1% until we stopped investing in the state at all, and now it's all being carried by private industry. I want to point out that an economic plan for the state is essential to this. Our state doesn't actually have one. I mentioned that earlier. And without that, how do you have the foresight looking at what our coming challenges are, what our coming opportunities are, that we should be working to take advantage of? I agree to some extent with Dana on we should be more proactive, but I think we need a plan how to do that.
Thank you. I'm going to go on to another question. Do state taxes need to be raised, or does state spending need to be cut to accomplish what is needed at the state level? Perhaps you have another solution. Explain.
I think that one goes to me. So, first of all, I'm not going to answer in any sort of soundbite. I've knocked on a lot of doors as I've gone around campaigning. One of the questions I get a lot is about taxes, property taxes, personal income taxes. And people ask me at times, shouldn't we cut taxes? And I said, well, yeah, I would really like to cut taxes. But I think the question is, what do we need to have for revenue to make the state function? And then how do we have a reasonable tax system that supports that and minimizes the burden on taxpayers? Now, I don't think we need to raise taxes. I will tell you that right now, and I hope we get into some discussion of some of the initiatives, the referendum initiatives, and we can talk about that. But I really want to resist simplistic answers that we are taxed too much, or that we should lower taxes. I think that's an inadequate response. Tax policy is complicated. Every time that you cut something, you have to figure out what's the state's role in funding vital programs and services. How do we maintain our roads? How do we support our education system, which we should be supporting at 55% level as mandated by the voters? So I really don't want to answer you, yes, I want taxes lower. But what I want to answer you is that I will work for a reasonable tax system. And I agree, Maine taxes are high. I think we should do everything we can to avoid changing that and increasing taxes.
Chris?
Well, certainly it isn't an easy thing to answer. And I would like to take it back, again, also not to a soundbite. Everybody wants lower taxes. But everybody also wants to have the health care they need, the roads in not tearing their vehicle up, the education that their children need, the businesses growing in the state, and all of those things and others cost money to do. So the real question is, how much is the right amount to run state government in a way that is meeting the needs of Maine people and set those priorities well? Is it doing it efficiently, or are we wasting money in the process? And then, how are we placing the burden for raising the money and providing what we all expect from the state on the people of the state of Maine? Is it fair? And I would have to say that one of the areas that we are actually working on trying to answer some of those questions in the legislature is that we managed to pass a requirement that OPEGA, the Office of Program Evaluation and Government Accountability, over the course of several years, would review every single tax spending program, every tax loophole or break that's given to determine what versus what it is intended to do, how well is it doing it, and how efficiently is the money that we're giving people for breaks going to achieving that compared to alternative ways. The other area that we need to look at, and this is where we're now working on the economic plan and the government oversight committee, because that's something which, when we were trying to find out from the Department of Economic and Community Development, how they were measuring the success of their different economic development spending programs, they didn't have a benchmark as to what was supposed to be achieved overall in Maine's economy that was helping accomplish. So we have this similar evaluation requirement, and we're looking towards applying the same sort of analysis to that spending as well.
Thank you. Dana?
Well, sometimes I think a simple answer is best. We need to lower taxes in the state. Why do we need to do that? Because we're 34th in income in the nation, but we're around 11th in taxes. Now, something is backwards there. And what does that do? It stifles businesses from growth. The referendum that wants to increase taxes 3% on the top 11,000 small business people that make $200,000 or more. That will stifle their businesses. Many of them, I'm assuming, are in this community, in this area. And the money that is supposed to go to education, if you read the bill, it says the legislature can do anything they want with that money. So don't think it's going to go to education. If it does, you're a minimum receiver. You're not going to get it. All that's going to happen is wealth is going to come out of this community to go somewhere else. We need to pay attention to what we do for businesses. We need to take the handcuffs off of businesses and let them grow. 30 years ago, I had one worker. I took my profits. I don't get to spend all my money. I get to pay taxes on all the profits. But I take a lot of it and I reinvest it in my business. A lot of businesses do that. A lot of us small businesses do that so that we can grow our businesses and hire more employees. And if we become a good, stable business, not only do we have more employees, we can give raises, higher salaries, health insurance, and some kind of retirement plans to supplement the Social Security when they get done, all the good work that they've done for years. We need to pay attention to businesses, and we need to help them out with smart tax policies.
Thank you, Dana. Stephanie?
You're on a roll. In 2010, the Republican-controlled House had income tax relief of $1.3 billion. And you can see all around the state the spending, because that $1.3 billion went into people's tax pockets. And like Dana said, you give raises, you buy equipment, there's so much, you've got to lower them. I'm all for lowering the taxes. People are tired of working their butt off and then paying it. They need to, I think you can cut spending in the, the state end of it, just keep clipping. There's a lot of waste there. I mean, some people put in 40 bills, which takes a lot of time. I mean, just right there, that's a lot of time that you can stop spending that kind of money. And if you trim down, like people do on their own budgets, you can lower taxes and still have a great state.
Thanks. Chris, about 30 seconds.
So I have to say that Maine isn't like every other state. We have unique challenges. We have twice as many miles of road per capita as New Hampshire with a similar population. If we just reduce our revenues, then we're going to create a downward spiral, because what schools are you going to fund? What roads are you going to maintain less frequently? You've got to have a plan that makes sense for what amount of revenues are appropriate to maintain the services that are most important. And I have to say that when it comes to businesses, the first two things of importance in deciding whether to expand or where to locate are a capable and educated workforce and sufficient infrastructure. That's some of the things that suffered when we had that big tax cut. And education funding as a percentage has been declining ever since.
Thank you. Dana?
We're already in a death spiral. Our population shows it, and the age of our population shows it. We need to do things different. New York State did something different. Their income taxes were so high, and you saw all the commercials. They were on TV for a year and a half. come to New York and set up a business, no taxes for 10 years because their taxes have been so high, they've driven out many businesses. We need to reverse this. We need a long-term plan, not short-term planning, to bring businesses and workers and keep our workers here in Maine and allow businesses that want to come here and expand. Right now, we don't have that because we have a mediocre business plan at best.
Stephanie?
That's almost like a Debbie the Downer attitude. You have to, if you create business, then they'll pay more and there'll be more money in the pot. If you say, oh, we're gonna tax them, let's just tax them and we'll get the money, you have to let people pay it.
I'm gonna give Wendy your.
I'm going to say something a little bit different. You know, one of the other areas that I think the legislature can focus on is wise use of every dollar. And that's not only our dollar, but federal dollars too. And there's a pattern right now going on in Augusta of actually not seeking readily available federal funds or sending back actually federal money for programs that Mainers can benefit from. An example is about $1 million, I think it was, to help people test their well water for arsenic and heavy metals. Who's heard of Fort Michigan and the lead in the water? For some reason, we received federal money to help people have free test kits so they can test their wells. And then the administration decided that we didn't need that money and we just sent it back to the federal government. Well, you know, I don't know if you treat your state government like your household budget. When you send a big pocket of change away, you got to make that up somehow. And that means if you want to test your water, it's coming out of your pocket instead of having the federal government help provide free testing kits. So there's places of waste that we can trim back. I think I think this is one area where we need to look at every ounce of spending as a responsible approach to our state budget.
I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and we have 6 statewide referendum questions on the ballot this year. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm going to state each one, and I would ask each of you to answer simply yes or no. Question number 1 is about marijuana. Legalizes, regulates, and taxes marijuana as an agricultural product. Wendy, I'm just going to start with you. Yes or no?
No.
Stephanie?
No.
Dana?
No?
Yes.
Question number 2 on education. Establishes a 3% tax on household income over $200,000 to support public education. Stephanie, yes or no?
Big no.
Dana?
No?
Chris?
Yes.
Wendy?
No.
Question number 3 is on firearms. Regulates specific background checks for all gun sales and transfers in Maine. Dana, yes or no?
No.
Chris?
Yes.
Wendy?
Yes.
Stephanie?
No.
Worker pay increases the minimum wage to $12 per hour by 2020. Yes or no, Chris?
Yes.
Wendy?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Stephanie?
No, no.
Okay, Dana?
No?
No. Elections. Establishes a statewide ranked choice voting.
Question 5.
Question 5. Wendy?
I'm still undecided, actually.
No.
No.
Yes.
Question number 6, issues $100 million in bonds for transportation products. Stephanie, yes or no?
No.
Dana?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Wendy?
Yes.
That's the end of this portion of the program. Take a quick stretch break, think about your questions. I would ask you to line up here, state your name, and remember, it's a question and not a speech, and you have about 30 seconds to ask that question, less if possible. and we'll start. We have folks lined up. Go with your question, please. State your name.
We had a choice to run between an election or a traditional one. Can you tell us what you chose, what you choose, what you have chosen, and why?
Why don't we start with Wendy? We'll go right across. Thank
Sure.
you.
Thanks for that question. I am a clean election candidate. I'm very proud that Maine has a clean election system. I'm a great believer in transparency, and as a clean election candidate, you cannot take money from individuals, corporations, PACs. You have to go around and talk to voters and get them to contribute at least $5 to the Maine Clean Election Fund on your behalf. And when 15 people do that, you can draw down some campaign cash. You can go on the state website, you can see everybody that's given a donation to my campaign, so it's all pretty transparent, and I'm delighted, and thank you to the 100 and now 52 contributors to my Maine Clean Election Fund, so thank you.
Steph?
I am a traditionally fund candidate, and I just don't believe that taxpayers should have to pay for my political signs, my campaign. It used to be, before that law went through, that each House candidate would get $5,000, in the Senate, I think, 15 maybe. And now it's the Senate $60,000 and House is $15,000. And you don't need $15,000 to run a race. That's a little too high, but it doesn't take the transparency out of PAC money, because there's still a lot of PACs and they still donate. I got a little nasty gram today on Facebook from the Maine Democrat Party, so that's PAC money that's supporting Democrats. So you don't take the big money out. I think that's false information, and they've jacked the price up so high that, like Senate campaign, you can't raise that much money, so you have to take it. And there's a lot of people in Maine that need help, and they need help with medicines, they need help with housing, and we're taking it and we're buying signs and ads, and I think that's wrong.
Thank you. Dana?
I'm a clean election candidate, Senate candidate, I feel. I don't have any choice. You can't raise the type of money that you need to run a campaign. This isn't Washington, D.C. When businesses or what other organizations donate to you, they donate at most a few $100s at a time, and that would amount to just a few $1,000s. We're talking under $5,000. It would be impossible to run a race. I think the amount that's allowed right now is too great. It comes out of your taxpayer-funded money. I believe the bill in the House said if they needed the money, they would take any extra they needed out of the business department, which I'm pleading to double or triple the size on. So I disagree with the amount. I am a clean funded election candidate.
Thank you. Dana? Oh, excuse me, Chris.
Been going by Chris for a while. I have a twin brother, David, though. It might have been slightly.
Went through my head.
I'm a clean elections candidate, and I've always run that way. I don't believe that there should be any question who candidate is representing because of campaign spending. It should be the people that are of the district. But I also want to say that there's nothing, no automatic additional money out of business or other areas of the budget that goes to the election funds. I also want to point out that while about $60,000 is the maximum that candidates can draw down, that's neither Dana nor I have gotten that much money. Dana's gotten a number of additional disbursements, qualifying for them with additional signatures and contributions from other people that hadn't previously given, and I've tracked that. But I'm qualified for more money than I'm asking to actually get, and furthermore, going to do my best to return a good chunk of that back to the Clean Election Fund if I don't need it to respond to last-minute communications from someone else.
Thank you.
Next question?
Yes, my name is William Merton. I would like to ask each of the candidates to state one area where they agree with Governor LePage and one where they disagree with Governor LePage. And two would be even better. Thank you.
Stephanie, would you want to start with that, please?
I agree with his fiscal responsibility. I think he really cares and he uses his mind like a business, and I think this stage of the game, you have to run a place like a business. And what I disagree with is sometimes he might get a little snappy and we spend all night doing vetoes. So that makes it a long night.
Okay. Dana?
I have the areas of agreement has to do with the economic policies that we put into place. Now, when I was in the House, 2010 to 2012, the state of Maine was headed in the direction Detroit was. We were going to go bankrupt. I mean, it wasn't that big, but we were headed in that direction and we had to make some cuts. So those policies I agree with. Where did I disagree? Well, I'll tell you right now, I think I was the first legislator in the Republican Party, and it made some people mad, to disagree with something the governor said. But I'm looking at an editorial that was published in the Lincoln County News, January 27th, 2011. We're a month into his office and a month into my office. And the title of it, Representative Dana Dow is a hero to Maine kids. And because I disagreed on taking back the Kid Safe product law that I had helped institute, and I had done that by working across party lines with Hannah Pingree, who later became Speaker of the House. And she and I worked on that bill. And so I was asked to speak on it, and I said, cooler, calmer heads will prevail, and this bill will not be undone. And it was signed by 4 doctors in the Damascotta area. If you have a chance, take a moment to thank him when you see him around town. So that's the area where I disagree.
Thank you. Chris?
And first I want to say, I agree with Dana on the Kid Safe law, and I'm happy that there is some moderation, and I think we both share that interest. In fact, we worked together on things like cleaning up the Madonna and getting cooperation of departments. Regarding agreeing and disagreeing with Governor LePage, I definitely agree with him on his stand on domestic violence. That is a serious problem in the state of Maine. Our problem with half of our homicides being domestic homicides is the reason why I support question 3. But I also agree with him. His office authorized the Department of Labor to work with me on the Veteran-Friendly Workplace Initiative to address a problem that a veteran brought to me, which is rolling out this Veterans Day. And we've been working on it as a department all summer with some veteran advisors. A couple of things that we disagree on. Certainly vetoing Maine Care, restoring Maine Care is a serious one for me because I know people who have died from a lack of having health coverage who had advocated for that. The vetoing of the solar bill would have given us some more energy independence and some more jobs that are good paying jobs. I guess overall the thing that bothers me the most is his approach, even with those in his own party, of my way or the highway, not wanting to actually sit down and talk about why people are coming at it from different positions and what their solutions are. They want to propose to the problem at hand and trying to find some common ground and agreement on those things. And I think good leadership should be doing that. Senator George Mitchell said that we should learn to listen be patient, and respect those with whom we disagree.
Thank you. Wendy?
Well, I'll tell you one thing, as a healthcare provider, I want to compliment the governor on his leadership on what's called Chapter 488, which is the bill that recently passed in the last legislative session that tried to rein in the prescribing practices of opioids. Maine actually has the highest per capita prescription of opioids of any state in the nation. And in my mind, the medical community was slow to step up to the plate, and the governor took leadership on this, and I compliment him for doing that and getting it out on the table and having it negotiated so that we ended up with some reasonable prescribing practices. So I certainly agree with him on that. And I also want to say that one of the things that the governor has done was bring forward a renewed conversation on fiscal responsibility at the state level. I think that that's a conversation that is always necessary in Augusta, and I think he's championed that cause very well. Where we disagree, certainly, obviously on healthcare with the Medicaid restoration. And I disagree in terms of how he governs, in terms of sort of my approach. I'm running because I really believe that we are all in this boat together, and that to make progress in Maine, we have to figure out how to work together, and that means civility and trying to figure out how we come together and identify things that we can agree on and try and figure out how we work out our differences. For me, it is distressing when I see a governor who will not even address the legislature and is really not stepping up to the plate in his executive responsibilities to be a collaborative leader. This is a disappointment to me.
Next question?
My name's Link Sample. You've already answered half my question. In regards to question 3, the background check initiative, it's not supported by a large majority of law enforcement across the state, including the majority of sheriffs. A similar law in Oregon was determined by the United States Department of Justice to be ineffective without a gun registry. And it really seeks only to make civilian firearm ownership in Maine inconvenient. I know where you stand on the question, but if you are elected and it passes, will you work legislatively to amend or repeal it? Thank you.
Dana, I'm going to start with you.
I feel that this law oversteps its bounds. It does more than what it says on the TV commercials, much more. It has to do with lending, a transfer, and I'm going to give you an example about that later, but when it talks about transferring, they took the definition of transferring a gun, not selling it, but transferring it, out of the law that has to do with transferring a gun to a minor. And so, in a sense, it treated adults like children. So here's an example where it oversteps its bounds. My brother has a shooting range in the back of his field. It's not a public one, it's a personal one we all use. He can go up there, shoot his guns. I go up there and shoot my guns and make sure they're sighted in. If his grandson was up there and wanted to shoot my gun, which we've always done in the past for years, he can't do it. It's against the law. And I can't shoot one of his guns. If we got caught, it'd be a fine and possible jail time. If we did it a week later and got caught again, it's a Class C crime. Neither one of us could own a gun ever again. By doing the things that we've been doing for decades, trying each other's guns. I can't get this in, sighted in, will you just help me out a little bit? So, and my brother's grandson is a Marine. He was injured twice. He got blown up twice in Afghanistan. He's my hero. But yet I can't let him shoot my gun, so this law oversteps its bounds.
Chris?
So, first of all, if this is, to answer your question directly, if this passes, I would not be working to repeal it because that would be contrary to the wishes of voters of the state of Maine. But I do think that if there are any ways that we can provide the safety, the protection of preventing guns from getting into the hands of dangerous people like domestic abusers and dangerous felons, the same criteria for who should be allowed to have a gun as applies when you have a background check at Cabela's or L.L. Bean's or anywhere else that's a licensed firearm dealer today, should apply. But if we can achieve that protection and make this less inconvenient for people, I'm all for it. It's not, in my mind, about creating inconvenience, it's about creating safety for people. And I have to say that in the states where the background check loophole has been closed, 46% fewer women are shot to death. 48% fewer law enforcement officers are shot. And I have to speak to the relative example provided. If you are a law enforcement officer or military, there are different exclusions for you. There's also an exclusion if your people are at a shooting range and you want to loan a weapon. That's one of the exclusions. But family member, Dana chose his brother's grandchild. Family member is actually pretty broad in this law as written now, and that could be changed if it needed to be. It means husband, wife, domestic partner, parent by blood, parent by adoption, child by blood, child by adoption, sibling by blood, sibling by adoption, grandparent, grandchild, niece, nephew, aunt, uncle, first cousin, father-in-law, mother-in-law, son-in-law, daughter-in-law, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, stepfather, stepmother, stepson, stepdaughter, stepbrother, stepsister, half-brother, half-sister, or intimate partner. If it needed to be changed, I would be comfortable doing so.
I'm going to ask Wendy, and I ask all of you, would you speak in your mics? They're not catching all of your comments on Channel 7. You don't want to miss any of them.
So I guess the question is, how intimate do you want to get with somebody quickly? So the first question is, no, I agree with Chris. I would not work to repeal this law. I think when the voters speak, the legislature is really charged by the voters to try and implement the law. Now, I will say that I am not a fan of all these referendum questions. I think referendum questions really substitute for what should be happening in the legislature, where you really debate and look at the evidence and hopefully carefully craft laws. And I think having so many referendum questions leads to sometimes laws that have flaws in them that then the legislature needs to work to try and amend and improve. And I think you brought up some good examples in this particular law. I would like to say, though, that the question 3 is endorsed by the Maine Chiefs of Police Association and by our own Lincoln County Sheriff, Todd Brackett. So law enforcement has diverse opinions on this, and there are supporters of it, and there are those who are against question 3. So thank you.
Stephanie?
I would work to repeal it. Maine is, besides Vermont, the safest state in the United States, and we don't have a problem. And we have one of the highest gun ownerships. So I think when you have a New York mayor coming in with a goal of just grabbing all the guns and having Maine be the grand prize because we have so many gun owners, that they're putting keywords in the bills to scare people. And, loopholes, we don't have the loopholes. We don't have the crime. So, yeah, I would, be- I think the people that wrote it are trying to scare people with those words, and I would work very hard to.
Sure, yes.
I'm going to get a little personal, not with any of the candidates, but, and certainly not intimate either. But as a physician, I've taken care of children who have been the victims of domestic violence. The number one cause of homicide in Maine is domestic violence. Our community has actually had 2 episodes of domestic violence in West Boothbay Harbor. And for me, it is not even a question. Today's Portland Press Herald had a story about a woman who was killed by her husband and buried in the backyard. Gunshot to the neck and the head. Now, I don't know, it didn't say if he was a legitimate gun owner or not. But if we can save one life, if we can save the lives of children, wives, husbands, because we close a loophole, I think that's worth doing.
Steph?
I think that maybe we should stop driving cars. I think we should probably stop eating too much because there's diabetes is killing. I mean, alcohol is a big factor. Drugs are a big factor in people doing, the violence. Chicago has really, really tight, probably the tightest in the nation, gun laws. And they have 25 killings a day. So it's not Maine that has the problem. You gotta start tightening it up. We're not the problem. We have gun owners that respect their guns and they respect their safety. They teach their children. We have guns, hunter safety courses, and I just don't think that we have a problem.
Chris?
And I have to disagree, because we don't overall have a high level of crime. We are a pretty safe state. But when you look at the homicides that occur, and you can see that half of them are women killed by their partners, if that doesn't matter to you, I'm not sure I want you for my neighbor. I mean, that should matter to all of us. And that is a problem that's worth addressing, because a responsible gun owner, I can't think of one, I've spoken to many at their doors, who would want to give a gun to someone who is an accused domestic abuser, knowing that that's a likely use of it. And yet, without a background check, what responsible gun owner would know whether the person that they're selling it to through Uncle Henry's is? I have to believe that this, for the lives it saves, and again, remember, in other states where the ability to go to a private sale, to go around the background check from a licensed gun dealer and obtain a gun still, it has cut down the number of women killed by 46%. I think that is worth some inconvenience and worth working to find where we can make it less inconvenient if we can still retain that safety.
Next question, please.
Joyce Polnick, and I'm here on behalf of the working poor. I know people, they don't earn enough money to qualify for the Affordable Care. They work, they're not healthy, they're in their 50s and 60s nearing retirement. One of them is driving a car that's 25 years old. If you ever see a pile of rust in the middle of the road, I know who that car belongs to. You can increase they don't pay taxes, so you can't they don't pay income taxes, you don't have the income to do it. You can decrease some of the expenses. We have homes. But why does a doctor have to give them free health care? Why do we gotta reach into a doctor's pocket, a dentist's pocket? Or why do they gotta pay things off as best they can? Because these are conscientious, honest people. When you step into office, when you're sworn into office, what are you going to do to help the working poor? The honorable people, the honest people, the people I let into my home to help me out when I need it.
Thank you.
I trust them that much.
Chris, would you like to start?
Well, first, I think the first part of that, answering that is I would restore main care coverage and not have the hospitals have to cover that health care as an emergency room visit when it's become critical, instead of they're getting the preventive health care that they need without the hospital running up charity care debt. But I also think that we have to do a better job for creating decent paying jobs for people in the state of Maine. If this is someone who hasn't yet retired, the fact that we've got people out there who can't find a job at the same time as we have jobs that are looking for people with the right skills means that we need to do a better job matching them up with the Parents as Scholars program or the scholarship program that will give someone new skills to start in a different career. It's a better opportunity for them. And that's part of what I think we need to be doing in our Department of Health and Human Services, where if people want to talk about reforming welfare, well, I think one of the most important things is that we make it accountable for achieving results. We can't afford to have people unable to get a job that supports them, not because they don't want to work or because they aren't working, but because they don't have the match up of the skills to what's available for jobs in the workforce, or we don't have enough jobs that pay a good, strong middle class income. And we need to change all of those things. But you heard me talk about creating jobs and about the economic plan, and that factors in certainly the responsibility to match people up to training programs and expanding to what we used to have for mean care coverage are two very important factors.
Thank you, Chris. Wendy?
Well, I would say, like Chris, one of my priorities would be to help restore main care coverage. And let me just, if I may, give a little education for just a moment. The last session of the legislature, actually the bill to restore main care was actually sponsored by a Republican senator. So there are people on both sides of the aisle that know that this is something that is necessary for Maine and good for Maine. But I want to explain to you why this is such an issue for lower income people, because under the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, the way the law is written is if you make less than the federal poverty level, which is about $15,000 for a single person here in Maine, you cannot get discounted or premium assistance on the health insurance marketplace where you get a private insurance plan. You are supposed to be covered by the state's Medicaid program, but the Supreme Court made that optional for states to do that. Now, I just want you quickly to go through the math with me. I'm a small business person, or I was up until the end of September, and the insurance for a single person in my business costs $500 a month. And if you wanted to insure your family, it cost $1,400 a month. Now, if you're earning $15,000 a year and you have to pay rent, you have to buy groceries, you have to buy gas for your car, you hope your car doesn't break down, there's not much money left to pay for a health insurance premium. In fact, there's not enough money left to pay for a health insurance premium. So these individuals are functionally locked out of our affordable health care system. And for me, that is a travesty. The other thing is that I think we need to do things that help restore dignity to people. There's been lots of castigation of the poor. And I haven't met a person yet that doesn't want to live their life with dignity, and I think that that starts by giving them opportunities to try and build self-sufficiency. Most of the people I know who are on assistance don't want to be there, and there are many people in Maine who qualify for assistance, and when I talk to them, I say, you're eligible for this. They say, oh no, there's someone else I know in my community, and they need it so much more than I do. Many people are really proud We need to try and do things like the Aspire program that gives job training skills to low-income people so they move off welfare, are more fully supported so we can restore dignity to people and get them on the path to self-sufficiency.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Well, obviously you want people, and I'm sure people want, or some people want to be off welfare. And the state now has a program that you can go get trained, you can volunteer, or you can work, and you can still stay on some sort of assistance. And now that was passed, you don't lose all your assistance, because a lot of times people are saying, I don't want to get that job, because if I make a certain amount, then I'll lose it. So they've turned it into a block plan, so that you can still keep your money and then just keep going down, so within 5 years you can adjust, and hopefully within 5 years you will get a raise or make a little more. So the state is working, and yes, there are 10% of people that can't get on Obamacare, and that's a flaw in the federal system that they need to fix, but you can't, I mean, you just can't give everything away. So everybody's just kind of got to work together.
Let's have our next question. Dana, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Dan. Not yet.
Sorry, Dana. Go for it.
The question deals with helping the poor. And so,
Could you speak into your mic, please, Dana?
Senator Cates and Senator Saviello, the two of the Republicans that have sponsored some of this legislation, I agree with quite a bit that they're doing. That does things on a temporary basis. What I want to know is, why do we keep doing things the same way we've been doing them for decades? Why do we want to raise the next generation of poor people? Why don't we change the way we do things? The reality is, my Republican colleagues many times are too tight to spend money on investment, which I have to do to grow my business. The liberal end of the party, the liberal end, wants to spend it somewhere else. When are we going to change the way we do things and start concentrating on people and jobs and getting them to work? Why do we want to create another generation of poor people that are going to come along and have the same problems? When I graduated from high school in the 60s, and maybe some of you in the 50s and maybe early 70s, you could step out of high school and get a pretty good job. You can't do that anymore today. You've got to have at least 2 more years of vocational training to get the type of jobs we need. And we're not pushing that. I am deadly serious when I say I greatly support vocational education. We need to train our young people and get them ready for jobs. We need to take a look at doing some of the things that we haven't done before in this state to improve the tax structure, to encourage businesses to stay, let alone bring new businesses in.
Thank you. Try it again.
And my question and my comments are very near and dear to me. I believe that tourism is probably the #1 industry in our country, in our state, and also in our region. My question to you is, if you are serving in the legislature next term, and if it passes, will you attempt to change the minimum wage increase law to protect the tip credit that is on the bill?
Who'd like to go first? I'm going to give you folks up.
I will.
Stephanie, good, thank you.
I would vote to repeal that, because waitresses, I have waitressed my whole life, and very, very rare do they make minimum wage or $12 an hour. You can make a very decent living waiting tables. You could, $20, $30, $40, $50 an hour you can make doing it. And I think you're gonna, if that happens, the business won't be able to, they're gonna go to counter service, they're gonna go to computer service, You could see it in the Applebee's and all the commercial ones like in Augusta and Portland. And I think it's gonna really damage our tourism here. And it's gonna cost a fortune for food, to go in and get anything to eat. So waitresses, every waitress that I've talked to, and I've been everywhere, and they don't want that. They want to work for tips. So I would definitely continue or fight so that they can keep the tips.
Dana, would you like to go next?
Thank you.
Could you speak in your mic, please? If you can.
Usually I don't have any trouble with people hearing me. I don't have a problem with raising some minimum wage. What I have a problem with is raising it way over the New England average, so it puts us on a scale all by ourselves. But as far as the tip wages go, the minimum wage $7.50, that means all staff, wait staff gets $3.75 an hour plus tips. If the tips don't come up to the minimum wage, the business makes it up for them, so they get a minimum of $7.50. I don't know of any wait staff that's getting that. I've got a friend at Moody's Diner. She told me she worked 10 hours the other day and earned $398. That's $40 an hour. And you want to tell her that she needs to lower it down to $12 an hour? That's bringing the Canadian system in here. The Canadians, I always thought what the waitresses said was true. Canadians are too cheap to tip. That isn't it at all. Wait staff in Canada get paid a regular wage. They don't give tips. So are we going to do that? A lot of these waitresses are single mothers trying to raise a family. And I even know another person, another friend, worked all summer in Damascotta, averaged $40 an hour. So please tell me that there's something wrong with that bill. I know there is. And there's quite a bit wrong with it, more than just the tip staff.
Thanks, Dana. Chris.
So I got to start with where we have some agreement. It is 2/3 of those earning minimum wage in Maine that are adult women. And the majority of them are people providing the only household income. In Maine, 1 in 4 children under the age of 5 lives in poverty. And frankly, this is part of the reason why. Because there are a lot of women not earning enough. It's great that there are some people earning $30, $40 an hour, including tips. But the fact is that the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that in 2015, a waiter or waitress in Maine made $18,850, or just over $9 per hour with tips. So some people getting a lot more tips, that's great. They don't have to give them up. This is not eliminating tipping. In fact, in other states and in other countries where they don't have a lower wage for wait staff, they still have tipping, and that's still happening. It still reflects whether you like the service you're getting, as well as the quality of the experience and the food that you get. That doesn't go away. But if we're not giving people who are working full-time enough to get out of poverty, and that is happening in less fortunate parts of the state than these tipping experiences, then we're creating part of that poverty problem that we're raising kids in. And if we don't want multiple generations of children as in poor, then this is part of the solution. It's to pay people enough so that a full work week doesn't leave you with poverty. And one last statistic, the number of children in Maine that are living in extreme poverty, that's less than half the federal poverty level, has gone up from 2010 to 2014 to almost 1 in 10 children, and from 6% to 9%. That's a problem we have to solve, and part of solving it is people earning enough money for their work, actually valuing work in our society matters.
Wendy, your turn.
Thank you, Laura, for that question. As you know, being the co-chair of the Joint Economic Development Committee here for the region, I'm very interested in tourism and doing things that support tourism. But I'm also very interested in making sure people earn a livable wage. I think Chris has just presented some of the statistics that I would have shared if he had not already summarized those. Again, I'll stress, this is not the best way to make legislation, is through referendums that spell out these sort of, what I consider not well thought out stages of how you implement a law. Would I repeal it if the people pass it? I will answer what I did before. When the people pass referendum questions, it is our responsibility to make sure that those questions are implemented, and then if there are problems with it, to try and figure out a legislative way that we can fix that. I do know there is incredible diversity of opinion about the impact on wait staff. There are restaurant owners that really embrace this change. There are restaurant owners that feel this will be very challenging for their businesses to accommodate. And there are wait staff that are very, very supportive of this change, and there are wait staff that are worried about what this means. I am not certain. I think that it is worth trying to increase the wage when the wage that you enter as a tipped worker is slightly above $3. If the law is not working, I think it's the legislature's responsibility to go back and try and see if we can improve it.
Stephanie, you want to-
Yeah, I think if you wait and see if it's working and see what's happening, you're gonna lose a lot of restaurants. That restaurants run on a very, very thin margin. And to make the payroll, I know personally that if payroll was Monday, you go, oh God, it's almost Monday, gotta make that payroll. So I think to wait for the restaurants to close would be a shame, because you would not only have people making low money, they would be making no money. And I think that's a problem.
Could I have my next question, please? Thank you.
Quick rebuttal.
Quick.
Thank you. I want to first say, because I left it out, that I would not repeal it. But in other states in New England, the schedule for increasing minimum wage is already ahead of ours, and will be incrementing as well. So we're not talking about Maine trying to get it the highest minimum wage among New England states. We're trying to stay somewhere close to where it is. Secondly, every single minimum wage increase has been accompanied by hue and cry about what sort of harm it was going to cause, and every place is going to close. And it has never caused the sort of harm that everyone is worried about happening.
Thank you, Chris. Next question, please.
My name is Lee Sherrill. I want to ask whether or not the legislature can do anything about our state's drug problem. And if your answer is yes, what you might suggest that the legislature could do. It seems to me this impacts jobs, it impacts health, and it impacts families. Thank you.
What did you like to start out?
Sure, I'm happy to start out on this. This is a huge crisis. I actually think I've got a letter in the Register that will be coming out about this, because this came up at the Lincoln County News Forum. We had a long discussion about the opioid and heroin addiction problem, and this is not only a statewide crisis, it's a national crisis. So the approach has, people have said the approach is a three-legged stool: law enforcement, prevention, and treatment. I actually think it's a four-legged stool. Community support has to be part of it also. We have to be engaged and be part of the solution. Now, as a healthcare provider, I can tell you there is a lot of attention happening in law enforcement. They have increased resources to arrest drug traffickers, and law enforcement is taking a big lead on trying to work with those who are addicted and ready to go into recovery, to find programs to help them get out of addiction. But there is inadequate resources for treatment. Obviously, restoring Medicaid would be a big help in addressing our drug problem, because it would provide coverage that would allow many people who are addicted to drugs to be able to find available treatment. Right now, there are very long waiting lists to get help to go into recovery. And this is very, very damaging. When people are ready to go into recovery, you need to act at that moment. It's similar to the alcoholic. When the alcoholic is ready to quit drinking, they need support right then so they can make that decision. There are also inadequate resources for prevention. We need to invest a lot more in that in the Maine Center for Disease Control and individual communities so people know how devastating this issue is and how we need to educate our young people about how this enticement of drugs is really something that can lead to early death and is a very, very significant issue. So that's how I would handle it.
Let's just go right up the table. Stephanie?
Yeah, we do have a huge drug problem, and every day that you look on the news, it's getting worse. I mean, now we have people eating elephant tranquilizers. I didn't even know that there were elephants in Maine, so now they're eating those. So, I think it's come fast and hard, probably within 3-4 years. It's been going on for a lot longer, but it's becoming stronger and stronger. And I think the communities, I think the families, I think everybody's got to pull together. You can't just say, let's wait for a bill. I think everybody's got to put their resources together. I think when the state funded more police you got to stop the source, for one thing. But the drug addicts are smart. I mean, the stuff, the bath salts that they sold, that was against the law, but they tweaked one thing with it, and then it wasn't against the law. Only these were. So they're on top of it. The meth labs. I mean, there's so much. So everybody's got to be aware. They got to start talking, and I mean, everybody's got to help.
Thank you. Dana?
Well, I'm glad I didn't answer first, because I would have addressed the ongoing drought problem. I didn't hear the right word.
We need it.
This drug problem has hit us like the recession of 2008. It came out of nowhere and it came fast. And in that case, the state must react fast. This is one place where we've got to have not only some long-term solutions, but we've got to have a quick, short-term solution. That quick, short-term solution is going to require money. Here is a case where we've actually probably got to take money from other people that want money, other departments. The tax pie is this big. It's been this big for all along for a long time, many, many years. It hasn't gotten any bigger. And everybody in Augusta wants their department increased by stealing somebody else's piece of the pie. And that was the only way we could do it. I say we've got to grow the economy to make the pie bigger. But anyway, in the short term, we're going to have to find some funds and spend some money to help solve this problem. If we had a sufficient rainy day fund, we'd have that money. Hopefully, we can get some money out of there. We need to run this state more like a business. There's more things that businesses have to save money, more than a leaky roof or the furnace broke. In this case, it's people's lives. And we need to address this problem. There are people that are ready to do it. We just need to put all these resources together, and we're going to have to make some special provisions to fund it.
Thank you, Dana.
It's got to be done.
Chris?
So this is, as was mentioned earlier, really, I would say a three-pronged problem to tackle. I think it's been here for quite a while, the problem. But it's become more in the forefront because with the availability of, rather than just heroin and coke, there are now much stronger compounds, the fentanyl compounds and others, that are so many times more powerful. You've got a lot of overdose instances, and the death rate in Maine is what's brought it to everyone's attention. But it's not a problem that just suddenly popped up. In addition, it has been increasing somewhat because of the prices of medications that are painkiller opiates that some people are, when they can't afford those anymore. Maybe they're one of the people, adults who lost Maine Care coverage when that was decreased by the state of Maine. Instead of being able to afford that medicine, they turn to street drugs because it's become so cheap, which is the other influence besides fentanyl on this coming to the forefront. So I'm going to say that we don't have to take a lot of money from somewhere else in the state budget to tackle this, because there are things that are costing us money because of this that we can help with. I mean, the jails, someone in our jails, because of the crime to support their habit, is costing us a lot more than treatment. Taking the federal dollars to expand MaineCare would cover the treatment programs for people. But I have to say that right here in Lincoln County, I've gotten together law enforcement and Maine Health and the Addiction Resource Center to reach an agreement and sign an agreement on what each of them is going to contribute to being able to get people into treatment, to come forward ready for it. And your own Chief Hash has been a fantastic role model for the sort of law enforcement involvement in that process that the rest of the county is now soon going to be replicated. We've gone through training for law enforcement officers, we have training for volunteers, and we're going to be rolling this out.
I see one person, and I'm going to ask you to respond very quickly because we're going to be over our time. So if you want to ask a very quick question.
Well, I don't know how quick this is going to be, but I would like your opinions on the future of Medicare and Social Security, and whether you think it should be increased and expanded or brought down.
So quick responses from all four of you, and then we'll do closing remarks. Go ahead, Wendy. Sure.
Boy, that defies short answer.
I'm sorry.
So the future of Medicare, I think there are lots of things happening to try and make Medicare much more efficient. It is going to be a challenge trying to balance Medicare and Social Security as our population ages. I suspect this means that there will probably be enhanced Social Security contributions from workers. Beyond that, I don't have other specific suggestions, but I think it's going to be one of the challenges we face as a nation, not just here in Maine. It's a federal policy.
Stephanie? I think you've paid all your life, and I think that you should be able to have it, and they need to do something to keep it rolling.
Dana?
I believe these federal programs aren't enough to sustain life, and that's why I'm so excited about economic possibilities that we need to do. We can't keep doing things the same way. People need to have better jobs. They need to accumulate wealth. You can't make the word profit a dirty word, so that if you earn it, we got to take it and spend it somewhere else. People need to be able to take care of themselves. We can't just continue to work on the short term and shoot ourselves in the foot for the next few generations in the long term. So my solutions are always better economics.
Chris?
First of all, Medicare is very low overhead. It's about 5%. It's far more efficient than any of the private insurance programs. But one of the problems with it is that at the federal level, they disallowed negotiating drug prices. That needs to be fixed. It's not something we can do here in Maine. But we'll start with that. On Social Security, that's an investment by people all their working lives in their retirement, and it needs to stay there. Not only needs to stay there, but it needs to follow the cost of living, because then it wouldn't cause as much of a crunch. I think it needs to be expanded in terms of lifting the cap on contributions to Social Security. And it would be great if some of the money that was borrowed from that separate trust fund for Social Security were returned to it by our federal government, so that it would remain solvent for many, many years, even without expansion. But it's ignored that that money was stolen from people's trust fund for their Social Security investment, and it needs to be returned. At the state level, there are a couple of things we can do at the other end. We can reduce people's cost of living in retirement. We work on the affordable housing, which we've not released the bond monies to build more affordable housing in the state of Maine. And there are 9,000 people who need a home, affordable housing for seniors. A lot more people statewide than all ages.
I'm gonna cut it off, Chris, because I know we're past our time. And I want you each to have an opportunity to share some closing remarks. and we're going to reverse the order of the opening remarks. And Chris, you were the last one to speak, so you get to be the first one this time. So maybe you could continue. And this is about 90 seconds.
Okay, about 80 seconds to compose my thoughts, and 10 seconds to share with you. I have to say that really what we need in the state of Maine for changes involves a lot more future planning. I've said a number of things. Investing in how to expand on our strengths in local foods, fishing and farming, and earning better living at that, our clean energy supply, our healthcare. And what we do as a state to build on our advantages are things that can't be just taken away from us. If we invest in helping the university with our wood products and put our woods workers back to business in rural Maine, if we help with the offshore wind potential for Maine, where there's 156 gigawatts of opportunity to create electricity for ourselves and probably a good deal of New England. Those are future opportunities that we need to build on as a state, but we need that economic plan as a roadmap for everyone. And I think that we need to be looking at the other policies that help people afford to live here, stay here, and run families to make this their home. And those have to do with housing and education and child care costs and medical coverage and better paying jobs through the economic work. We have a great opportunity as a state to live well in future generations if we're smart and look at the future and figure out how to do it. We should be getting together to make that happen.
Thank you, Chris. Wendy.
Well, I want to thank everyone in the audience for participating, and I have to say this is the most pleasant and informative political exercise I've had in about the last year. And it didn't involve national politics, which was really a relief, so thank you all. I'm running in this race because I'm actually very optimistic about Maine's future. And I'm optimistic for several reasons. One, Maine people are incredibly resilient, and they are incredibly hardworking. And there are many, many, many good things that are happening in Maine. We don't spend too much time talking about that. Most of our questions tonight were about problems. Those of you who have worked with me here on the economic development know I said we need to build on our assets. We need to know what works, and we need to make that work more. And there is a lot of stuff happening in Maine, both with growing our economy, with looking to future jobs, trying to figure out how we improve energy independence, grow sectors in alternative energy that would provide good year-round paying jobs, and seize opportunities to try and do the things that we want as a people to both preserve and restore both dignity and care for our neighbors and our friends, such as providing health care, and also trying to make sure that we have an economy that works for everyone. These are the things that are motivating me to run, and I am ready to really work collaboratively with anybody who is interested in addressing these issues and trying to move Maine forward. That's why I'm running. I want to have a future here that I'm very pleased and proud to nurture and have my grandchildren and children be here and enjoy how the future of Maine unfolds. So I'm running on a platform of both optimism and building on our assets. And I appreciate everyone's attention and careful questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Dana, you go next.
My solutions always come down to economics. And I say that, I guess, because I'm a businessman and a school teacher. Things aren't always as simple as they seem, and they're complex. And so I want to give you an example in my closing remarks when we were talking about raising wages for waitresses in restaurants. That may solve a problem for a handful of people that aren't earning enough. But look at the restaurants and see what happens to them, and think about all the things that go into it. It isn't just an increased wage that's being paid that's gonna cause the price of food to go up, so that we pay more for it when we go to the restaurant. But the employer also has other expenses. There's unemployment insurance that will go up for the business. Unemployment insurance is based on how much wages you pay. So if the unemployment insurance will triple if the wages triple. Then there's matching Social Security payments. There's all of these things that always come into play. Things are not as simple. That's why I thought we really did a disservice in going yes or no on the referendum questions, but things aren't as simple. I want to do things in a different way. I want to make some loud noises and not be as quiet as I was before. We need to do things differently. We've got to get a handle on it, and we've got to jump on it before it's too late, because this state is in a downward spiral. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Stephanie?
All right, last. First, which I didn't thank before, is my family and everybody that's helped me with this campaign. It takes a lot. Everybody that's helping me is working full-time, and I really, really appreciate it. The reason why I'm running for re-election and asking for your vote is basically the people in our district. They come daily and they thank me for being available, thank me for helping them navigate through state bureaucracy. They felt for years that they haven't had that, and now they do. I'm not out campaigning, months and months of election season. I'm out there talking to the people year round. I'm helping them, for years. Not even before I was in the legislature, I've been helping people and helping people. So it's not just pop out there and head out to the dump 2 weeks before an election, or walk the streets. I am there for the people. I don't put my name on bills just to have my name on bills and say I want 40 bills and look at me. I take careful consideration into what I've signed on, so it's not that. I think it's important, I go to school with the people, my family has gone to school with the people, I've grown up with them, so they have no problem confronting me. I shop local, I eat local, I go to, local events, so, I think, I'm looking for your vote in November, and I think I'm in touch with the locals, and, I want to continue to be. So, vote Hawk.
Thank you, Stephanie. Again, I want to thank our candidates. I know this sometimes is not easy, and we put you in very precarious positions and ask difficult questions, and they are complex. There's just not enough time to answer them. So I thank you all for your time and your thoughtful questions and your thoughtful responses. And I want to thank Kathy Sherrill again and the Opera House and the Channel 7 crew and Chip and Bruce, the Greenhouse for their donation of flowers, and particularly I'm looking at Louise and Paul down here with their cards, and I thank you very much. Who are here tonight, and to all of you who are watching on Channel 7, listening to the candidates, listening to their positions and why they take those positions is important in making an informed vote on November 8th. My appreciation and good night. Thank you.